In the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso, near the coordinates 11 degrees south, 51 degrees west, lies a question mark roughly the size of Western Europe. We tell ourselves there are no more blank spaces on the map, that satellite imagery has peeled back every secret. This is a cartographer's conceit. The truth is, the world is not flat, and a top-down view reveals nothing of what lies beneath the canopy, or beneath the surface of our own history. In 1925, one of the world's most respected surveyors, Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett, walked into this exact region to fill one such blank space. He was searching for a lost city he codenamed Z, based on a cryptic but detailed 18th century Portuguese document known as Manuscript 512. The manuscript describes a stone city of arches, statues, and hieroglyphs, discovered by explorers after a 10-year journey. Fawcett, his son Jack, and Raleigh Rimmel were last heard from at a location Fawcett called Dead Horse Camp. After that, silence. The official record is stark. Over the next century, more than a dozen official expeditions would search for them. The unofficial death toll of those who followed is estimated to be over 100. Fawcett wasn't a fantasist. He was a meticulous geodesist, whose positional calculations were later verified to be uncannily accurate. He was convinced he had found something tangible, a cultural source point for all of South America. Yet, the enigma isn't that he vanished. The enigma is what we found since. Recent LiDAR scans in the nearby Xingu Basin have uncovered the remains of the Cuhikugu settlements, a network of pre-Columbian towns connected by raised roads, supporting a population once estimated as high as 50,000. Not a city of stone, but a sprawling, highly organized society that collapsed after European contact. So, was Fawcett wrong? Or was he simply using an old map to find a new reality? He went looking for a lost city and instead found a lost world, one we are only just beginning to chart. The true enigma of Z isn't what Fawcett failed to find, but the scale of the world he stumbled into, a world whose existence upends our entire conception of pre-Columbian history. 52 years after Fawcett vanished, in the state of Para, near the coordinates 0 degrees south, 48 degrees west, the Brazilian government was confronted with an enigma not buried under the earth but hovering directly above it. While the search for City Z was a quest to understand a lost past, this was a military operation forced into existence by a terrifying and very present unknown. On the island of Colares, a community of fishermen began reporting aggressive, unidentified lights in the sky. It's a rare day when a government mobilizes its air force to investigate what locals have nicknamed Chupa Chupa, or the Sucker Sucker. But this was no mass delusion. The phenomenon was a public health crisis. Over several months in 1977, hundreds of citizens reported being targeted by beams of light, leaving them with puncture marks, first and second-degree burns, chronic weakness, and severe anemia. Events that were linked to at least 2 deaths. In response, the Brazilian Air Force launched Operação Prado, Operation Saucer. This was not a fringe investigation. Led by Captain Irange Holanda, the operation generated over 2,000 pages of documents, 500 photographs, and 16 hours of film. The military meticulously documented objects they described as maneuvering at impossible speeds, sometimes diving into the water, other times hovering silently over their own personnel. The official report was, predictably, inconclusive. The files were classified. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, many of the documents were declassified, and Captain Holanda himself, shortly before his death, broke his silence, confirming the authenticity of the encounters and his team's inability to explain them. The Colares file is not a story about aliens. It's a documented case study of a modern government using its full military and scientific apparatus to investigate a phenomenon, and failing. The mystery isn't what was in the sky. It's what's in the official records. In the far western corner of Amazonas state, centered around the coordinates 5 degrees south, 71 degrees west, lies a government-enforced void on the modern map. While the Brazilian Air Force pointed its cameras at the sky over Colares, trying desperately to document an unknown, here, the state's primary directive is to point its resources outward, to prevent anyone from looking in. This is the Vale do Javari indigenous land. At 444 square kilometers, an area larger than Austria, it holds the highest concentration of uncontacted peoples on Earth. Brazil's Indigenous Affairs Agency, FUNAI, confirms the presence of at least 16 distinct, isolated groups. They are not lost. We are simply not allowed to find them. This is a deliberate, state-sanctioned creation of a human blind spot, a radical policy reversal championed by the explorer Sidney Pozuelo, who saw the catastrophic results of forced contact and chose to build a wall of ignorance around the last who remain. The mystery here is not legend. It's a living, legally protected reality. The unseen are not specters, but entire human societies whose languages and histories are a complete blank. It's a strange contradiction. In an age where we map the seafloor and the surface of Mars, here is a territory we are forbidden to chart. If this exploration of the world's enforced shadows and official secrets is a journey you wish to continue, we invite you to support our work and subscribe. Because the prohibition on knowledge here is not a request. It is a lethal reality. The valley's borders are a front line against illegal miners, loggers, and traffickers who see the protected status as an exploitable weakness. The 2022 murders of Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and journalist Dom Phillips were not a random act of violence. They were a data point, a stark confirmation of the fatal risks involved in even trying to document the edges of this unknown. From a space deliberately kept outside of our knowledge, we now turn to a place that may exist outside of our established timeline. In the semi-arid scrubland of Piauí State, centered near 8 degrees south, 42 degrees west, lies a geological formation that doubles as a chronological crime. This is Serra da Capivara National Park. The previous accepted narrative of human arrival in the Americas is a tidy one. Hunter-gatherers crossing the Bering Strait land bridge around 13,000 years ago, their presence confirmed by distinctive Clovis spear points found across North America. It's a clean, linear story. Serra da Capivara makes a mess of it. Here, since the 1970s, Franco-Brazilian archaeologist Nide Guidon has systematically excavated over 1,000 rock shelters. What she found doesn't just challenge the timeline, it attempts to obliterate it. Charcoal deposits from what are argued to be structured hearths have been radiocarbon dated to 48,000 years before present. Painted rock fragments, fallen from the walls, have been found in layers dated to over 30,000 years ago. The academic world did not receive this news with open arms. The data was, and still is, fiercely contested. The counter-argument is that these are not artifacts, but geofacts. That the fires were natural, the flaked stones a result of rockfalls, not human hands. But the sheer volume of evidence here is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. We're talking about 354 archaeological sites containing over 30,000 painted figures, a library of evidence suggesting a human presence tens of millennia before anyone is supposed to be here. This isn't a forgotten legend. It's a peer-reviewed, UNESCO-recognized, deeply polarizing scientific fact. The anomaly is that our entire model of human migration might be wrong, and the proof has been sitting in plain sight in one of Brazil's poorest states, waiting for someone to carbon date it. From a timeline in dispute, we move to a territory that was erased from the map entirely. In the highlands of modern-day Alagoas State, centered near 9 degrees south, 36 degrees west, a sovereign nation was systematically destroyed. For nearly a century, from approximately 1605 to 1694, this territory, known as the Quilombo dos Palmares, existed as a direct refutation of the Portuguese colonial project. To call it a settlement of escaped slaves is a gross oversimplification. Palmares was a confederation, a network of fortified villages called Mocambos, covering an area comparable in size to mainland Portugal. Population estimates are a matter of intense historical debate, ranging from a conservative 11,000 to upwards of 30,000 inhabitants, a figure that would have made its capital, Cerca do Macaco, one of the largest urban centers in Brazil at the time. This was not an unstructured group of fugitives. It was a multi-ethnic, multi-generational society with a complex political system, a formidable military, and an agricultural economy so successful it sustained a century of near-constant warfare. Colonial records document at least 24 major military expeditions launched against Palmares by both Portuguese and Dutch forces. For 90 years, they all failed. Its final destruction in 1694 required a force of over 6,000 mercenaries and regular troops, equipped with artillery, a level of force usually reserved for European wars. The problem for historians is that almost our entire understanding of Palmares comes from the records of the people who spent a century trying to destroy it. Its own history, its internal politics, its view of the world was effectively silenced. Archaeological work at the Serra da Barriga site only began in earnest in the 1990s, a slow, meticulous process of recovering a history that was meant to be forgotten. Next, we examine a different kind of state building, one sanctioned by a crown but no less controversial. In the far south of Brazil, within the state of Rio Grande do Sul, near the coordinates 28 degrees south, 54 degrees west, stand the ruins of a completely different kind of lost society. Where Palmares was built in defiance, this one was built with the full sanction of the Spanish crown, a utopian experiment that ultimately grew too successful for its own political survival. These are the Jesuit Guarani reductions. From the early 17th century until 1767, the Jesuit order established a network of 30 autonomous towns that, at their peak, housed a population of over 140,000 indigenous Guarani. This wasn't a simple missionary project. It was a state within an empire, a theocratic proto-communism where land was held communally and all production was centrally managed by the priests. The results were statistically staggering. The 7 reductions located in modern-day Brazil became an economic powerhouse, producing and exporting thousands of tons of yerba mate, cotton, and hides annually, all without the use of currency. The central curiosity, however, was their military. To defend against Portuguese slave-raiding expeditions, the Jesuits obtained royal permission to arm and train the Guarani. They created a disciplined, mounted army of several thousand soldiers, a force that became so effective it was regularly co-opted by the Spanish to fight their own colonial battles. The project's end came not from failure, but from a line drawn on a map in Europe. The 1750 Treaty of Madrid traded the territory containing these 7 prosperous reductions to the Portuguese. When the Guarani and their Jesuit leaders refused to relocate, they used their Spanish-sanctioned army to fight a war against both Spain and Portugal. After their inevitable defeat and the subsequent expulsion of all Jesuits from the Americas in 1767, the system collapsed. The society was dismantled, its people scattered, and its unique model of social and economic organization was erased, leaving only these monumental stone ruins as evidence. Off the coast of São Paulo State, centered roughly around 23 degrees south, 45 degrees west, lies a mystery not of stone ruins, but of absence. The Jesuit Guarani reductions were dismantled by treaties and armies, a deliberate human act of erasure. But some societies disappear for reasons far less clear, their memory submerged not by politics, but by the Atlantic itself. This is the forgotten world of the Sambaqui builders, a people whose story is told not in myths, but in the geology of a coastline that no longer exists. Their identity is a puzzle, preceding later groups like the Tupiniquim by millennia. At the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than they are today. This exposed a vast coastal plain along Brazil's southeastern flank, in some places extending more than 100 kilometers further out to sea. This wasn't a hypothetical landscape. We have proof of its inhabitants. Submerged archaeological sites, primarily ancient shell mounds known as Colosso Sambaqui, have been located on the sea floor, some dating back over 7,000 years. These were not temporary fishing camps. They were the permanent settlements of a significant population, lost to the slow, inexorable sea level rise of the early Holocene. The central anomaly is the disconnect between the geological certainty of this lost land and the near-total lack of large-scale archaeological investigation. While fishermen occasionally report their nets snagging on what they describe as man-made structures, the official scientific effort to map this submerged landscape has been inexplicably minimal. It seems finding a lost world is more compelling when it's on land and made of stone, rather than underwater and made of mud and shell. A clear failure of imagination, if you ask me. The true, ancient map of Brazil's first peoples doesn't end at the beach. It continues out into the ocean, waiting for a different kind of explorer to reveal it. From the submerged maps of a lost coastline, we turn inland to the sun-scorched Sertão of Pernambuco State, a landscape centered roughly around 7 degrees south, 38 degrees west. Here, the treasure is not archaeological, but material, and the map to it is not written on stone or seabed, but in the notoriously unreliable currency of folklore. This is the enduring mystery of the lost fortune of Virgulino Ferreira da Silva, better known as Lampião, the most famous or infamous bandit king in Brazilian history. From 1922 to 1938, his band of cangaceiros terrorized 7 states in the Northeast, extorting money, jewels, and gold from towns and wealthy landowners. The legend, which persists with an almost religious fervor, is that Lampião buried this immense wealth in dozens, perhaps hundreds, of caches, or botijas, across the arid backlands. The problem is a simple one of logistics. Lampião's group was a mobile guerrilla force, rarely numbering more than 100 people, constantly pursued by police patrols. Transporting and burying vast, heavy quantities of gold and silver coin would have been a tactical and physical nightmare. The more probable reality is that the plunder was a fluid asset, spent almost as quickly as it was acquired on weapons, ammunition, supplies, and a network of co-conspirators. It's a rather inefficient form of wealth management, even for the 1930s. The story's anchor to reality is its brutal conclusion. On July 28, 1938, at a rocky hideout in Angicos, Sergipe, Lampião, his companion Maria Bonita, and 9 others were ambushed and killed. Their heads were severed and displayed as proof of the state's victory. Crucially, no significant treasure was recovered from the site. Yet, the central anomaly remains. For all the thousands of treasure hunters who have scoured the Sertão for 80 years, not one single, verifiably authenticated *botia* of Lampião's has ever been found. Not one. Given the sheer volume of his documented extortion over 16 years, the statistical probability of a complete absence of any recovered caches is, itself, curious. Perhaps the real curse isn't on the gold itself, but on the obsession to find it. A ghost fortune that holds more power as a legend than it ever could as mere metal.